The fire started just after 11 p.m., a cold, windless night where every breath fogged in front of your face like a warning. Mason Price drove the old fire truck himself, headlights slicing through the dark back roads as the radio barked coordinates. Whitmore property, Northeast Ridge, just off Hollow Pine Road. The Whitmore place hadn't seen a soul in years. The barn was falling in on itself long before flames touched it. Local kids dared each other to sneak out there on Halloween. No one stuck around long. Something about the place made your skin feel too tight. By the time Mason and the other volunteers reached it, the barn was already swallowed in orange. Fire danced through the collapsed rafters and climbed the silo like it wanted to scream. They sprayed the edges to keep it from spreading to the dry brush. It wasn't worth saving, just containing. "Looks like arson," muttered Cal, an older volunteer, his breath pluming in the air. "No lightning. No power out here. Somebody lit this." Mason nodded absently. He felt it too. Something wasn't right. The heat on his face was real, but behind it, he felt cold, like stepping into a shadow that didn't match the angle of the sun. When it was out, just smoke and wet cinders, everyone started packing up. But Mason lingered. He found himself walking the perimeter alone, flashlight cutting across blackened timber and warped iron tools. That's when he saw it, a slab of scorched stone half covered by charred boards and soot. He cleared it off, coughed into his sleeve. Beneath the ash was a square outline etched into the stone, an old trapdoor. No hinges, just a rusted iron ring embedded in the middle. He hesitated, then pulled. It groaned like something waking up. Cold air breathed up into his face. Earthy. Sour. He aimed his flashlight down. A narrow stone stairwell descended into darkness, curving slightly like it didn't want to be seen from above. He looked around. The others were gone, truck engines fading into the night. Mason descended. The walls were stone, old, probably pre-Civil War. Damp roots hung like veins. Every footstep echoed like a drumbeat in a closed chest. He counted 27 steps before the stairway opened into a small room, maybe 10 feet wide, lit only by the trembling beam of his flashlight. Iron rings were bolted into the stone walls. Chains hung from them, rusted and stained. A metal bucket sat in one corner, half filled with something black and solid. Across from it, a narrow wooden bench. On it, 3 leather-bound journals stacked neatly, like someone left them there for him. Mason flipped one open. The handwriting was uneven, frantic. Day 41. They have not returned. The darkness speaks to me now. It speaks with my voice. He flipped further. Day 117. I dreamed I was outside. It was lying. There is no outside anymore. Goosebumps crawled up his arms. He picked up the top journal, and something scraped behind him. He whirled. Nothing. Just shadows. Then he saw the carvings. Etched into every wall were markings, crosses, eyes, spirals, and symbols he didn't recognize. One, repeated dozens of times, looked like a human figure bent backward, mouth wide. Mason took out his phone, snapped pictures of the journals, the carvings, the whole room. His hands shook. This wasn't just an old root cellar. This had been a prison. He bolted up the stairs, lungs tight. The night air hit him like a slap. He looked back once at the open trapdoor and the yawning dark beneath it. Back in his truck, he scrolled through the photos. They were clear. Every carving, every journal page. Proof. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he called the sheriff's office and his fire chief, asked them to meet him back there in the morning. He knew what he'd seen. He wasn't crazy. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that something down there had seen him too. The sun was barely up when Mason pulled back onto the Whitmore property, this time in his pickup, headlights cutting through early morning fog. Sheriff Dunn's cruiser was already parked beside the fire chief's SUV. Chief Harland climbed out and stretched, still in jeans and a county fire hoodie. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, rubbing at his grizzled jaw. "I didn't," Mason said, jaw tight. "Wait until you see this." Sheriff Dunn, younger, lean with sharp features and mirrored sunglasses, crossed his arms. "You found what?" "Shackles under the barn." "And journals," Mason said, already walking toward the charred remains. "Someone was held down there, I swear." They followed as he approached the stone slab, now blackened but still visible in the dirt. He knelt, brushing off the surface with gloved hands. Then stopped. There was no ring, no seam, just solid, pitted stone. His pulse quickened. "It was here. I opened it last night. Went down a stairwell, 20-something steps. There's a room down there, I swear to God." Chief Harland frowned. "You sure it wasn't a coal chute? Root cellar, maybe." Mason stood up and pulled out his phone. "I took pictures. Look." He unlocked it and opened the photo app. The top row of images, taken at the scene the night before, showed only charred beams, scorched stone, and twisted metal. He scrolled further. Nothing. No carvings, no journals, no underground cell. "They were here," he whispered, heat rising in his chest. "I saw them. I had them." The sheriff exhaled slowly, then glanced at Harland. "Smoke can mess with you. You stayed out here alone, after a blaze, in the middle of the night. You sure you didn't?" "I didn't imagine it," Mason snapped. "I was clear-headed. I know what I saw. I read those journals." Sheriff Dunn lifted his shades. His eyes were tired, not unsympathetic. "You've been on call a lot this month, Mason. You might need to take a few days. Rest up." Harland added, "We can bring in a ground scanner next week, but unless something collapses or starts smelling like bodies, there's no budget to dig." Mason didn't respond. He just stared at the solid stone beneath him. He felt it like a punch. The way a door can close behind you, silently, and vanish. That afternoon, Mason skipped his shift at the garage and drove to the Elkridge Public Library. He dug through county records, maps, and old news archives. The Whitmore family bought the property in 1918. The barn was built in the early 1930s over the foundation of an older cabin that burned down in 1906. There were no records of a basement or storm shelter, just the note, "Original root cellar condemned." He widened his search. A clipping from 1955 mentioned a missing farmhand named Nathan Bell, last seen working the Whitmore fields. A few other articles over the decades referenced similar disappearances. Drifters, seasonal workers, even a local boy in 1972 who vanished while chasing a dog near the Whitmore fence line. No suspects. No conclusions. Mason's skin prickled. None of the articles ever connected the dots. He reached out to Mary Jenkins, the last living neighbor from the area. She agreed to meet at her nursing home the next morning. Mary was sharp-eyed despite her age, with a voice like gravel and fingers that shook only slightly when she took Mason's hand. "I remember that barn," she said, sipping tea. "We weren't supposed to go near it. Mama said the Whitmores had secrets under their land. That Mr. Whitmore locked things down there he didn't want the wind carrying. Things." She tilted her head. "Could have been people. Could have been worse. I remember waking up one night, must have been 49 or 50, and hearing screams from their woods. My father grabbed a lantern and sat by the window until morning. Mason swallowed. You think they were keeping someone prisoner? Mary didn't answer at first. She just looked past him. Some people said there was something down there you had to keep buried. And if you didn't feed it, it came looking. That night, back home, Mason let his dog out and noticed something strange beneath his bedroom window. 3 long scratches etched into the wood. Parallel. Deep. Fresh. His phone buzzed in his pocket. No name. Just a message. Stop digging. Mason didn't leave the house for 2 days. He taped blankets over the mirrors, unplugged the TV, covered the windows with garbage bags. He kept the lights off after sunset and carried a crowbar with him from room to room. The scratching in the floorboards had stopped, but now it came from inside the walls. Duke wouldn't enter the living room anymore. The dog stayed pressed against the front door like he wanted out, but was too afraid to go alone. When Mason tried to walk him beyond the driveway, Duke dug his paws in and refused to move. That evening, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow raps. Then silence. Mason stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the door like it might breathe. Another knock. This one softer, closer to tapping, like nails. He grabbed the crowbar and crept to the door, jaw clenched. Looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just fog and gravel and night. But on the doorstep, left like a gift, was one of the journals. Just one this time. The final one. He didn't want to bring it inside, but his hands moved on their own. He opened it on the kitchen table, ignoring Duke's growl. Only one entry inside. No date. No handwriting. Just block letters carved deep into the paper. You opened the gate. We are the echo. Below it, in smaller writing, something that looked hastily added. You have to seal it again. Not with chains. With blood. Yours. Or another's. The floor beneath the table groaned. Something knocked once from the crawlspace. Mason backed away. He remembered Lucy's notebook. Don't read the final page. Too late. He felt it now, like something had turned its face toward him. Something old and hungry and half awake. He didn't sleep that night. At dawn, with shadows still clinging to the trees, he loaded Duke into the truck and drove back to the Whitmore ruins. The frost hadn't melted yet. The ground crunched underfoot as he walked back to the place he swore had vanished. And there it was. The trapdoor. Clear as day. This time chained shut from the outside with new bolts. The chain was warm to the touch. He pried it loose with the crowbar and opened the door. Stairs led down, steeper than before. The air reeked of mildew and rust. Duke refused to follow, whimpering and pawing at the earth. Mason looked back at him, then descended. The room was unchanged. The stone walls, the shackles, the carvings, but now there was a mirror leaned against the far side. Not a part of the wall. Freestanding. Tall. Its surface dark like oil. Mason stared into it. His reflection blinked after he did. But slower. The eyes were the same shape, same color, but the pupils didn't move. It smiled. Mason didn't. Then something shifted behind it. A seam opened in the wall. Not a door, just a split in the stone, revealing a second tunnel beyond. Narrower. Breathing. He should have run. Instead, he stepped through. He wasn't seen again. Not that week. Not the next. His truck was found still running at the edge of the Whitmore woods. Duke was inside, dehydrated and shaking. The fire chief and 2 deputies searched the ruins. The trapdoor was sealed shut. The stone was solid. There was no tunnel, no journals, no mirror, just one object left behind in the dirt. A crowbar, slick with something red that had seeped into the earth and dried. A month passed. People stopped looking. The town whispered about fire trauma, about grief, about mental breaks. But some remembered Mason as someone honest, stubborn, kind. Then, on the first snow, a new volunteer firefighter named Daniel started his first shift. At the station, he found a cardboard box tucked into his locker. No one claimed to have left it. Inside were 3 old journals. On the inside cover of the top one, written in faint pencil, "Daniel, you saw. Keep reading."